Now then, tonight. Now the subject of tonight's meeting is shadow people. Now I knew nothing about this till Emlyn said, we're talking about shadow people next month. I said, okay, thanks very much. Anyway, you're going to be addressed by myself and Emlyn, and I'm also very pleased that our good friend Mr. Mark Rayworth is with us tonight, and you'll be able to hear his take on the subject as well. Now then, it's probably noteworthy of mentioning that none of us have discussed the subject at all with each other beforehand. So it's going to be interesting to see what our different viewpoints are and where the subject matter of our talks may align, overlap, concur, differ, etc. Now then, I want to open by discussing the subject of sleep paralysis. So hands up, anyone who's ever experienced hands? Oh, you have? Oh, quite a few of you. Excellent, good. Well, if you've never suffered it, then believe me, you're lucky. I've actually experienced it about 3 occasions in my lifetime. And with me, it's normally occurred at the end of a night's sleep, just as I'm waking up. I find myself suddenly waking up, but unable to move. My limbs are paralyzed. I'm unable to speak. Now, whilst this in itself is a frightening enough situation, what makes it worse is that very often you're also experiencing a more sinister scenario. And in my case, there always seems to be a presence in the room with me that makes me feel threatened, and it feels malevolent. And on one occasion, it showed itself as a shadowy figure. Now, I don't mind telling you that I've been absolutely filled with terror when this happens and tried to shout out for help to my partner sleeping next to me. Thank you. It wasn't that creepy. Thank you very much. Thank you. We can see each other again now. Anyway, as I say, you try, no matter how hard you try to speak, all you manage to get out is a sort of a guttural noise, and that situation makes it even worse. Now, eventually I find I slowly begin to regain the use of my voice and my limbs, and whilst I'm very relieved, I'm left bathed in a bath of perspiration caused by the struggle to regain the loss of control that you've experienced. Now, in many cases, the subject may feel the weight of a body on top of them, hot breath on their cheek, a voice in their ear, pressure of hands on their shoulders, or even claws digging into their skin. So then, what is sleep paralysis, and what causes it? Well, the NHS describe it as follows: the temporary inability to move or speak that occurs when you're waking up or falling asleep. Now, they describe it as not being harmful and which should pass within a few seconds or minutes, but it can be very frightening. They say that many people have sleep paralysis once or twice in their life, whilst others experience it a few times a month or even more regularly. It affects people of all ages, but is most common in teenagers and young adults. Now, the NHS's explanation for it is that you are unusually experiencing REM, or rapid eye movement, when you're actually waking up. Now, REM normally only occurs at the deepest point in your sleep pattern, when the only thing that you can move is your eyes and the muscles facilitating life support. Now, that scenario obviously exists in all that you can't hurt yourself by acting out what you're dreaming, and it's termed paradoxical sleep. Now, we can all accept that particular part of the NHS's explanation for the phenomena. But what they don't explain is why in almost all cases people experience an accompanying feeling of terror, and often visions of a figure with them in the room, or indeed hovering above or sitting on top of them. That sounds kinky. So has the medical world provided a scientific explanation for a symptom that is more likely a psychic or spiritual occurrence? Well, I believe they have. I'm sure they've all sorts of explanations for many conditions that others accept as having a spiritual or psychic basis, but I'm also sure that many knowledgeable groups would disagree with them. An example would be certain members of the religious profession who are often called in to cast out demons and poltergeists from persons or properties. Now, if they didn't believe, then they wouldn't involve themselves in such issues, would they? The phenomena is absolutely worldwide, and I'll give you some examples. In China, it's called ghost depression. In Japan, it's termed Kawasaki. No, that's a bike. It's kanashabari, which translates as bound or fastened by metal strips. In Turkey, it's karabasanit, which translates as the dark presser. In Fiji, it's called kanatavoro, translating as eaten by a demon. In Nigeria, it's called the devil on your back. Tibet and Vietnamese languages translated as held down by a shadow. In Newfoundland, it's the curse of the old hag, and southern states of the USA term it as witch riding. Okay, now picture this. Has this ever happened to you? You're lying on your bed or sitting comfortably on your sofa, perhaps reading a book or browsing the pages of a magazine, listening to the radio or watching television in a dimly lit room. All of a sudden you notice a movement across the room out the corner of your eye. It appears as a figure, dark and shadow-like, but you know it shouldn't be possible as you're the only one in the room. Well, you probably shrug it off and get back to whatever you were doing, but perhaps then it happens again. This time you look up swiftly, perhaps just in time to see a shadowy figure disappearing through a wall or out of a door. So what was it? A natural shadow from the dimly lit room? A figment of your imagination? A ghost? Or was it another worldly being lurking in the shadows that seems to be part of the spreading phenomenon of apparitions known as the shadow people? Now, some people merely feel a presence, while others actually see a shadow person appearing like a black silhouette that is darker than the darkness in the room. They've been reported as being tall or short, sometimes with a hood or a hat, sometimes without. They seem to be able to move very, very quickly and pass through solid objects. If it occurs whilst the person has been asleep in bed, then sometimes the entity may just stand over them, or sometimes it will climb onto the victim's body, giving them that feeling of being held down. Sometimes the entity will talk, other times not. Now, these shadow people are perceived entities that appear as a hazy patch of shadow in the shape of a living humanoid figure. Sometimes they are seen with glowing red or green eyes. Some of these entities materialize wearing the clothing of a medieval monk with a hood, whilst others wear a fedora-style hat or even a top hat. More and more people are claiming to see these persons for prolonged periods through the daytime as well. Some moving across rooms and others lurking in doorways. And in some cases there does seem to be a feeling that they're giving off a menacing vibe of malevolent intent, as if feeding on people's fear or energy. Now, I know there exists plenty of photographs and film footage of what purports to be ghostly images, but unless one of these shadow figures experienced during so-called sleep paralysis is actually filmed or photographed, it's very difficult to prove their existence. However, what does exist is corroboration of their appearance. Now, in the majority of cases, shadow people seem to appear to only one person at a time. But there have been a few recorded occasions when a second person has walked in on the shadow, thereby interrupting the attack. It would appear that in these incidents, the shadow disperses quickly, taking time to look at the intruder before going. There are several reported cases where someone has been woken by another person in the same room and actually shared the same experience that they're undergoing. Now, an example of this was a 10-year-old boy who was sharing the same bed as his mother as he was feeling unwell. He'd been watching television in the bedroom when he fell asleep. Now, at about 2 a.m, he was awoken violently by his mother, who had also woken up, but she was screaming loudly. She was sitting up and pointing at a wooden dresser across the bedroom. So the boy saw a shadowy figure which was perched, crouching on it, watching his shrieking mother. The figure turned its head and started staring at the boy, as if realizing that the boy too was now awake. It then jumped down from the dresser, and the blurred figure disappeared out of a doorway into the hallway at a faster speed than any man could attain. From then on, his mother refused to discuss the incident, other than inferring that the shadow figure had given her a feeling of great malevolence. So what's the explanation for all this? Well, a number of suggestions have been proposed over the years. Now, the first is mental state, or the pull yourself together scenario. Now, in this case, it's purported that these shadowy figures are purely caused by an individual's state of mind, and that anxiety and stress have caused an overactive mind. Other causes of their appearance are reported as being triggered by physiological or psychological circumstances, such as drug abuse, side effects of medication, and also sleep deprivation. Now, I can accept this explanation as regards the inability to move or speak sensations, but as far as I'm concerned, it in no way accounts for the appearance of the menacing figures which worldwide are always reported accompanying the symptoms. If it is merely hallucination, then why is its subjects never report seeing anything benign, like a vision of Mickey Mouse, a cuddly animal, a handsome man, or a beautiful woman? There are a host of things a person could hallucinate about, so why is it always a sinister figure? The second suggestion is that there are those who believe that extraterrestrials or aliens are the shadow people. Aliens who in many cases are just going about their business on our planet, disguised in the shadows perhaps. Now, in cases of alien abduction, alleged abductees subsequently nearly always describe the atypical grey alien that either abducts the person involved or conducts physical experiments on that person in their own bedroom. Many reported cases involving alien abduction experiences start out with an initial memory of being strapped down onto a bed and being unable to move, whilst the figures moving over them. Now, firstly, I don't think this is the explanation for shadow people, but what do I know? Thirdly, there's a paranormal explanation. Some people are of the opinion that they are some form of ghost or manifestation of a residual memory of an individual whose energy has lingered in the mortal world. Their spirit has not yet passed over to the other side, and possibly this is why we see them as a dark, shadowy figure rather than a ghost, which has taken on the bright light allegedly experienced when moving on to the other side. Fourthly, time travellers. Could these shadowy people be humans travelling back in time, unable to manifest into a solid form due to the constrictions of time and space, therefore presenting themselves as a shadowy figure? Fifthly, the fairy realm. It is said that fairies, goblins and gnomes exist in a parallel realm of magic and regularly pass back and forth between the two. It is said they have an allergy towards iron. I've got an allergy towards ironing. Anyway, they tend to shy away from technology and advances in civilization, normally preferring to appear in natural wooded surroundings. They often materialize as flickering or bright orbs of white light. If anyone remembers the talk that was presented by Djin a few months ago, you'll no doubt also remember the stunning photographs she had taken. 6, there's a proposal that these shadow beings are the embodiments of actual people whose physical bodies are elsewhere, but they're engaged in astral projection. Now, astral projection occurs when a person's consciousness leaves their body, either knowingly or unknowingly, to travel. This often happens when a person is asleep and dreaming, but some people are well practiced and capable of astral projection at will. 7, we come on to the Djin. I can't abide this stuff myself, but there you go. It's been said that in the beginning there were 3 creations. Man, made of clay or earth and water. Angels made of spiritual light, and a third being made of fire, which are known as the Djin. Now, these are not talked about much in the Western world, being a more Middle Eastern tradition. However, in the Western world, we would more likely refer to them as demons. They are said to have been created before man and are mentioned in the Quran as malicious, wicked beings with supernatural powers created by God from a pure, smokeless fire. They are covertly depicted in many tales and stories, an example being Aladdin and the genie in the lamp. Now, the 8th possibility is also a paranormal explanation, and this is the one I would subscribe to. Therefore, I'm going to go into this one in a little bit more detail. This is the theory that the dark entities are actually interdimensional beings. Now, many people support this theory strongly because theoretical physicists believe the laws of physics allow for other dimensions to exist and for beings to cross over. 95% of the universe is made up of dark matter, which we cannot see and know little about at the moment. Due to this, there is the possibility of other dimensions existing, which are invisible to us. Stephen Hawking himself has stated that there could exist shadow galaxies, shadow stars, and even shadow people. This means entire populated realms could exist that we don't even know about because we can't perceive them. The shadow being phenomena could be caused by other dimensions that overlap our own and occasionally intersect with ours. Now then, has anybody noticed that time seems to be speeding up? Yeah. Yep. Do the years seem to be passing more quickly? Do you think summer seems to go a lot quicker and come and go as it, a lot quicker than it used to? Now, while a day is split into 24-hour increments, time just seems to be moving faster for many people. Well, if you're one of the people who think so, you may be putting it down to the fact that you're growing older and it's a natural thing. Well, let me tell you now, that may not be the reason. This phenomenon is not just being experienced by the older generation, but is happening right across all of the age group, from teens through to the elderly. Everything in existence revolves around vibration, as atoms vibrate to create our third dimension reality. Now then, if the atoms vibrate faster, the illusion of time speeding up is created, because physiologically our bodies are sensing the speeding up of something, but we cannot attribute it to anything other than time. The reason we cannot see other dimensions is that they are vibrating at a higher rate than our own. Now, if you are experiencing this phenomena, then you may be one of the people who, unbeknown to themselves, are moving between dimensions. This is typified by a large proportion of the general public who are seeming to remember events slightly differently to others. And this has been termed the Mandela effect. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Mandela effect, yeah? Okay. The term came to be coined as most people know that Nelson Mandela was jailed in 1964, released in 1990. But there's a huge proportion of the population that strangely seem to remember that Mandela actually died in jail while serving his sentence. There's a lot of examples of things like this. Let me give you another one. Do you remember the old game of Monopoly? Do you remember the smart little animated man that used to wear the suit that was displayed on the box? I think his name was Uncle Pennybags. Does anybody remember him? Little old man? Yeah. Can anyone describe him, what he looked like? Top hat and a monocle. Thank you. Right. Top hat and a monocle. Right. Well, a huge proportion of the public would remember him quite distinctly as sporting a monocle, but in our reality, he never, ever did. Okay, so are you moving between dimensions? Now then, there's a host of examples of people's memories of things different to other people's, and that, according to a lot of experts, is evidence that some people seem to be drifting between dimensions where the same things are happening, but perhaps with different outcomes. Right, I'm digressing a little bit here nowadays, so let's get back to shadow people. I'm almost finished, actually. So, now, as I've said, some people never experience the phenomena at all, whilst in the case of others like myself, it may be a couple of times in their lifetime. However, there are some people who have to endure this problem on a regular basis. So how can they protect themselves from this frightening syndrome? Well, it's been proved that the best way is just to stay calm. That's easily said, isn't it? Not to display fear and mentally tell these entities to depart. Now, whilst that seems an all too easy solution, and perhaps not easy for an occasional sufferer to perform, regular sufferers do report that by showing that they have control over the situation, it causes the shadow people to depart, being no longer able to feed on the fear of the person involved. Anyway, that's more or less my take on the subject, so we'll see what the others are going to say in a minute. I'm sure the subject, like all the other ones we discussed, may seem quite outrageous to a lot of people, but let's be fair, how much do we really understand about life and creation? We can accept anything indigenous to our own planet, such as life, electricity, magnetism, and the earth, seas and rocks around us. But when we look out at space, our understanding of how it was created eludes us. We tend to think of everything as having been created in some way, and mainly by us. So how do we explain the existence of the vastness of space, or even the Big Bang Theory? Something must have existed before that, and where did that something come from? Who or what created it? How can we explain the existence of something if we don't know how it was created? So how very little we actually understand. So next time someone thinks it's amusing that you attend these meetings, just bear in mind that they also have no explanation for the things we discuss. And unfortunately for them, they do not possess the interest or enthusiasm to try in some way to make sense of it all. Anyway, thanks for listening to me. That's about it. And I think Mark will be up next in a minute now. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to start by sharing a couple first-hand experiences, personal experiences with yourselves to do with this subject. I've had quite a bit of experience with shadow people, and also dealing with them as well, which can be easy sometimes, but we'll crack on. Different kinds of shadow people. This is just a sketch, and as I say, I didn't get the pictures. I think Emlyn will cover the pictures because he's got quite a lot there. But you've got the spider-looking ones, which I've seen twice, and you've got the figures. Then I've not seen the one in the hat, but I've not seen the hooded figure either. I've just seen the silhouette of the shadow people. But it's fascinating to see that there's different kinds. There's even the small spider kind, which I saw twice running towards me, which Max Spears reported before he passed. Or did he pass? That's the question now, isn't it, lately? So, there's different names for the shadow people throughout the world. We have the serpent gods, as Far East and Central America. We have the Chitauri, which is the Zulu. We have Snake Brothers, Hopi, demons, Christianity, archons, Gnostic, Djin, Islam, and shadow people. It's just a broad term that's covered by people identifying what they're seeing, basically. Now, some of the personal encounters that I've had first-hand to hear and experience. One was at my mother's, and this was years ago, and these encounters didn't end too well. My sister had a party at my mother's. She lives down in Langland, and one of her friends, male friend, stayed in the bedroom up in the attic, and he, in the morning when they woke up, they had breakfast, and he said he saw a dark figure standing by the door, which is there for a long time. That day, he died in a car accident. So sometimes these kind of encounters are experienced. It seems that they're in the right place at the right time for the fear or the trauma, because again, that's where I believe that they feed on our life force. The other one, this is when I was 10, and it was about the same time as I saw the triangles, back many years ago. I was 8, somewhere around there. I was with my mother and her friends, and her friend explained that she saw her husband walking out the door to go down to the Tower Bingo, and there was a black shadow behind him, and he had a heart attack outside the Tower Bingo and died. So I thought I'd cover these ones because it's Halloween, just to scare you, and hopefully, you know, be looking over your shoulders on the way home.
Yeah, just a bit.
Recent encounter, this was within the last 2 weeks. This was in Cornwall. This is my friend Steve, his friend. I told him, and Steve posted up to us. They were driving down into Cornwall. There was the whole family in the car. I think it was 4 of them. And they saw a black shadow on the side of the road. And they were wondering if it was going to cross the road. And lo and behold, it did. It crossed the road, and they all saw it, which was pretty amazing. Encounters in my house. Not much gets past me, I got to be honest. My peripheral vision is superb. And I often see them passing through, and I think they pass through. Generally, we can't stop them. They come into our realm, and they take a look around. They look at where they can feed. They look at any experience where they can aggravate the situation to create more of that negative energy, and they feed off that basically. Mine was with my little girl. I was sitting on the settee downstairs, and I saw a black line go through the ceiling. Immediately after, my little girl started screaming in the bedroom. So I run upstairs and obviously try to tune in to see what was there. There was one of the spider entities I could see. And I could see it was like floating. And it wasn't on feet, it was just like wisping like that in the corner by her bed. So I wasn't able to deal with that one. It was very dense, very heavy. So I ended up taking her out of the room and waiting for things to disperse a bit. But they did in the end. So every night when my daughter goes to bed, I clear that room for her and put a bit of protection around there. So obviously they're coming in, and I think they have an ability to affect our dream state. And they can create us to have bad dreams as well, which again feeds them where they can get the sleep paralysis, and they can sit on you then and do all sorts of things. So this is an excerpt from Carlos Castaneda's, and this was Don Juan, was the shaman, was talking to Carlos Castaneda. We have a predator that came from the depths of the cosmos and took over the rule of our lives. Human beings are its prisoners. The predator is our Lord and Master. It has rendered us docile. They took us over because we are food to them, and they squeeze us mercilessly because we are their sustenance. Just as we rear chickens in coops, human eros, therefore their food is always available to them. And I believe this, and I've kind of been aware of this for some time. But as I say, they are easy to deal with. And I think there's different levels of shadow people. Some are really heavy, really, I don't want to say evil, but because they are just a species at the end of the day. And some they have intelligence, and some are easy to go. Some you can simply ask to leave, and some won't go so easily. So this is from a friend, Todd Akamisis. He posted this last night, and I asked him if I could use this, which he said it was okay, give me his blessing. He posted this: for me, I no longer subscribe to the belief that physical spacecraft occupied by non-human intelligences from other star systems are visiting Earth. After having many close encounters in the waking state, dream state, and out-of-body state, I've come to the conclusion we deal exclusively with an interdimensional phenomenon. I would also go as far to say that my personal experiences of this phenomenon lead me to believe there is a deliberate intrusion on humanity by certain interdimensional beings, who in collusion with select world governments are using technology to adversely affect our perceptions of reality. During a recent out-of-body experience, I was advised by a trusted non-physical friend to recalibrate my nervous system on a daily basis as a countermeasure against this alien technology, which is capable of affecting us physically as well as psychically. My non-physical friend also warned of the dangers of man-made technologies that are being designed to blanket the Earth in an unnatural radiation signals. From my research, I'm fairly certain he was referring to the global rollout of 5G by 2020, and more soon. Todd is an expert on out-of-body experiences. I know a number of you have probably heard of him here. Some of the stories of him leaving his body and the experiments done has been absolutely amazing. And even to the point where he's reported military bases out on the astral realm. And this is how big it gets. And I think this is, there's a war going on around us with these beings that we don't even understand. And a lot of us haven't got the perception to see that. But I think more and more people are waking up to this phenomenon. And a lot more people are becoming more aware more sensitive, and you hear of more people getting out the body and doing these things and seeing these things and speaking to people. So it's very interesting coming from Toby. You can check out his Facebook page or his website, because he has some fascinating videos. Lawrence posted the first one up, which got me onto him, actually, and then through synchronicity, there's another friend that got me in touch with him. So yeah, very interesting guy, and he knows quite a bit. So their reasons and interest in us. Obviously, source of food and sustenance, and we've been this for a long time. And I think the more we understand with this phenomena, the less effect they can have on us, because we understand when we feel certain things, when we sense that being behind us or looking over our shoulders. There's things we can do, which I'll get onto a little bit later, but yeah, that's one of the things. They can create what they want through manipulating us. And I believe that we as humans are the creators of this realm. Everything about us, the whole systems, our brains, everything is geared up to live on this realm, in this heart realm. And they can only create through us and through manipulating us. So they use us, and they've used us for a long time. So it's time to get aware, people. They interfere with our harmony to create energy. Again, repeating, you know, you hear reports of people going through divorce or split with kids and general disharmony in a household. And then they start becoming sensitive and seeing things. These beings move in. In a weird way, we shine bright to them on that realm when things are happening in our lives. So they tune in and come and have a feed, basically. So they chomp off our life force, and we feel like crap the next day. But thinking we've had sleep apnea or something. But there's more to it. There's more to it. That one I've covered. In the higher part of our existence, I believe they do control government agencies, high-level government. I believe they do create wars. They've got a specific setup with wars. They will manipulate our governments to go to war with each other. It's interesting to know that there's certain ways with a mass problem like that, like war, they'll always set an obelisk up somewhere. Okay, and the obelisk, I believe, is to troll the energy in a big way off our realm and into their astral realm, where they're from. So that's one of the setups of what they do. And we are literally their reason for living. They can't experience what we experience through consuming us and our energy. They experience highs, the light, different realms. They can't do it themselves because they're not from the earth. They're from the lower realms. So they have different things down there, probably, that wouldn't be interesting to us. I can say that. I won't be interested in having a look down there. But they get to experience, or they get us to manipulate things with our minds, or they get us to create things with our minds for them. Because I believe as a mass consciousness, as a mass species, if something's reported on the news, which I believe is from them in the first place, then it hits a target area of a large amount of people. We start believing it, because a lot of us still believe the news. And when we start believing it, we give our intent to it, and then we create it. And I 100% believe this is how our reality works. And reality is a bit of an illusion, and I think it's like Play-Doh. It can go either way. So again, as Steve talked about timelines, yeah, the alignment is happening. We keep aligning, and I think timelines do shift, and we experience different things. So I think we're all jumping all the time, and I think it is down to our level of perception as well that allows us to jump in a specific direction. So it's knowledge again. Knowledge is power. So on our planet, we have, as most of you know, we have ley lines, energy centers. Within the big grids, there's a smaller grid. And then within the smaller grids, there's smaller grids. And it keeps coming down like that, whittling down until you've got little energy centers and little portals, I believe. Now, it's very interesting because I believe they come in and out of our realm, and I believe they are highly advanced. I believe they use frequency, and they use the energy centers to come in and out. So I think there's a mapping system. I think each energy center has a particular sine wave. They match the sine wave with our frequency, or the frequency of that portal, and they're able to open it up. And I think it's very simple for them. They're doing this all the time. I think this is the way we as a species used to operate, but we had that taken from us because we are built for it. So what I've got by here with the crystals in our brain has been recently discovered by mainstream, but I have to say in the alternative field it's been known for a long time. We have crystals in our brain, and the crystals in our brain resonates with the different portals across the planet. So to do with sine waves, I want to say, if you play a sine wave, I think around about 14,000 hertz, and our ears can't hear it anymore. But when you get there, you still have the ringing in your ears. And I believe at some times, do you know, when we sit in there and we hear that boo, I believe that within our proximity, there's a portal being activated because sine waves open them. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting thing to understand and get a grip of and see how sound works and see how frequency deals with our reality. Also from the crystals, I believe, also the new thing which has gone mainstream again is the geometric structures that they found in our brain, which, you know, going back to looking at symbology and stuff like that, the geometric symbols, esoteric symbols and stuff. We create these symbols naturally with our everyday thoughts. And I believe the crystals vibrate in our brains, and then our brains make the geometric structures, which levels our frequency with whatever we're aligning to at the time. You know, whether it's reading a paper, whether reading a book, whatever thought process we're going through, we align with it. So it's very interesting thing to look up. I've got the links here, which I've got no internet connection on this iPad, but if you want the links, you can check out this information for yourselves. It's very interesting when you get into it. So, dealing with encounters. For me, I've had quite a bit of experience with this kind of thing. And the easiest thing I will say to do is, a lot of people say, imagine light and surround them in light. But I think, obviously, our emotions, our feelings, the feeling of love is light. Everything's light and sound and resonance. So if you took your family member that you love dearly, and you can imagine embracing them, and this is the best, this is the one that's always worked for me when I felt them coming close. It's a good test as well, that if you use this and they go quickly, it's more or less a lower vibrational entity. If they hang around, it's a higher vibrational entity. So you imagine, for me, I'll make an example of myself. I imagine my little girl, and I imagine embracing her and loving her. And then when I feel that loving feeling, I spread it out around, and I spread it out over the entity as well. All right? So that he's feeling it. If they can tolerate that, then they're worthy of staying there. But if they can't, they go straight away. And more often than not, they leave straight away. Straight away. So it's kind of a test. And through doing this, I don't get as many sightings anymore. I think they kind of know and they leave me alone. But hearing about other people with these problems and with these issues going on and not knowing how to deal with it, I feel like sometimes I want to be there to help them. It's very simple once you understand what's operating, what's going on in the house, and how a shift in awareness and consciousness can actually change the whole household. So that's basically it with my part. I hope it's interesting. Give you something else to think about. Any questions? Give me a shout later. Thank you.
I'm not an expert. Most of the information I got here is from people that we've talked to since we started the group, and a lot of the internet, because that is the best place these days for information if you're researching something. Before we started the group, I'd never heard of shadow people. Obviously, I'd had a couple of sleep paralysis episodes, feeling of a malevolent presence in the room. First time it happened to me was in a hotel in France. And like Steve, I think probably 3 or 4 times throughout my life, I've had dreams where I've been in a house or a room, and there's a presence in the room. It's all part of the scenario in the dream. You think of it as a haunted house, and there's something there, and it's quite a horrible feeling actually in dreams like that. And as Mark said, I think a lot of dreams can be influenced by these beings we call shadow people, and I'll go into a little bit of that in a minute. As I said, I've never heard of shadow people before, so it's really opened my eyes. When we started collecting the UFO cases and the abduction cases, this thing kept popping up I'd never heard of before. It was like these hooded figures, these dark hooded figures like monks. And I thought, well, why does this keep popping up? So I started looking into it a bit more, and it really opened my eyes. So, shadow people come in, as the others said, it comes in a variety of appearances. A shape that is generally male in appearance, as like that. It's obviously a man. I'm going to click my fingers every time I want to know. Because it's better than just saying, next shot, please. Incidentally, Steve and I and Mike, we've been to a couple of WI groups in the last month, giving talks. And I was well versed with saying, next shot, please. I always got fed up of saying it. So.
1 click for forward.
A click is better, yeah.
2 clicks for back.
Right. The other thing is they can be aware of us and react to our observing them, whereas some ghostly phenomena completely oblivious to us. Some could be recordings in the atmosphere, in the aura of the area, just a recording, in which case it wouldn't react to our presence at all. Other ghostly phenomena might not be aware of us because they're not tuned into our frequency. So they're in their world, in some cases not even knowing they're dead, where in cases of spirits of departed people. The typical shadow person is tall, ranging from about 6 foot to 7 foot. Very often, I'm going to get a laugh every time I click now, aren't I? Very often they seem to be wrapped in a cloak, or large old-fashioned cloak. Hats are not uncommon. Every time I see that hat, I keep thinking of Heisenberg in Breaking Bad. And the hooded figure is very reminiscent of the Angel of Death, isn't it? The Grim Reaper. Yeah. And I'm sure the Grim Reaper figure, or character, has come from people's views of this. As Mark said, there can be a premonition of death. You touched on a couple of cases yourself where the person died that day after seeing one of these beings. And another thing I thought of when you mentioned that was the Mothman phenomenon. Yeah. Quite often appearing before a great disaster. And what The Mothman seems to be this dark figure, sometimes with two red eyes, which can be in some categorizations of the shadow people. The ones with the red eyes are what in the West we call demons. They're the more evil, in inverted commas, type. Their appearance has depth to it, unlike a shadow cast on a wall that is flat. Quite typically, they have no visible eyes, but some will have glowing red eyes. Shadow people are rarely reported to have spoken or tried to communicate. Physical objects seem to not matter to them, and they can walk through walls. My click fingers wearing out now. And they can have a demonic shape and demeanour. We've gone too far now. I think where I am now.
Could a cap you are?
Yeah. Leave it on that one for a minute. Human-shaped shadow people. These make up the bulk of the shadow people sightings and include the typical cloaked figure and shadow people wearing hats. These can come in a variety of combinations. Obviously, what these shadow people are is pure speculation at this point in time. The persistent shadow people of the lurking variety don't generally seem to be purely evil in intent, and almost seem more interested in us, or at least in feeding off our energy. Others are simply negative manifestations of spirits. Almost universally, though, they are a sign of something negative. Go on the next one. Yeah, leave it on that one. A black mass shadow people. Less human in form, but still of that general size, and the black mass type of shadow people give the impression of being a human figure, but more fuzzy or blurred. They can change in shape, forming more of a cloud, but the impression is always that an entity is there. Some assert that many of these black mass shadow people are former negative spirits that have begun growing in power and losing their human identity. As they absorb more and more negative emotion, their sense of being human and who they are fades and becomes distorted. In the end, they become a form of the following type of shadow people: demonic. We talked about the Djin earlier. In early Arabian and Islamic mythology and theology, the Djin are supernatural creatures. According to the Quran and certain ancient records, the Djin were created from smokeless and scorching fire, as Steve said earlier. An individual member of the Djin is known as a jinni or genie. In the Western world, Djin are sometimes referred to as demons. According to Rosemary Gilly, author of The Djin Connection, one of the many forms of the Djin is the shadow people. They exist in a parallel dimension in the physical world. They are here, but in a place we cannot normally experience. In folklore, elves and fairy lore, Mark touched on that. Especially here in Wales, there's a big tradition in folklore with fairies and elves and special places. Do you remember we had Ellis Taylor here earlier in the year, and he's very tuned in with the earth spirits, what we call, but I think more of the positive side rather than the shadow people side. It's the Tylwyth Teg. It's the fairy realm. Abductions by fairies. There's a parallel with the alien abduction scenario where people were taken into this other realm by the fairies, sometimes for a week, and the person not knowing that a week had passed, and they get returned thinking it was just an hour or two. People tell them that we've been gone for a week. It's very, very reminiscent of the alien abduction scenario, even to the extent of the fairy ring, and what is a crop circle but a ring, and the pagan sites, everything's in circles, like stone circles, and flying saucers are rings as well, aren't they? There's one case in the Vale of Neath in 1856 where a guy called Ronald Rees disappeared. And on his return, he had no idea that he'd been gone as long as that, and the local people told him. And it was then that he recalled the following. He said that he'd been returning home after finishing work one night, when he encountered an eerie light that made a whooshing sound in a field nearby. He went to investigate the light, and on getting closer, found that he was floating. The next thing that he could recall later was of being physically examined by small beings who took blood samples from him. The encounter had caused physical effects on him in that it's left scars, and his skin had turned bright pink and his hair was falling out. How many times have you read that in a UFO book where people have been abducted? But that was in 1856 in Neath. I mentioned Rosemary Gilly. This lady's done a lot of work on shadow people, and if you're interested in the subject, I recommend going online. There's a few interviews with Rosemary at a couple of UFO conventions in America. She's written a few books on the subject and a couple of articles, one of which I picked up when I first became aware of Rosemary was in the Nexus magazine, where it was specifically about shadow people, and completely opened my eyes to something when I really found out about the subject. She says she's sure that they were here before us and they resent our presence on Earth. Their agenda is the destruction of mankind. You've heard about the incubus and the succubus. It's where the shadow people manifest in human form, hovering over us when we're asleep, sitting on our chest. If male, they're called incubus, and if they form female forms, they're called the succubus. Sometimes they're seen as a grey mist or smoke that changes shape as they move. This is actually a still from a video that was taken of a real manifestation of this grey mist or smoke. They can be attributed to poltergeist activity as well as unsettled spirits. They can move things around, they can create noises, smells, as well as appear in apparitional forms. You're not laughing anymore. My click not funny anymore. They can influence our dreams that are a real experience in an alternate reality. Because when we sleep, we actually travel on the astral plane. We leave our bodies and we actually converse with departed loved ones and move around. And we don't remember any of that because when we wake up, it's all locked away. But when we're on this astral plane, or for want of a better definition, another dimension where we access it with our being, we can interact with these other beings. And the dreams, some dreams that we experience, are our own brain making sense of being in that other realm. They can affect moods and thoughts. Mark mentioned about they seek out bad stuff happening and make it worse because they feed off the negative energy that's generated. Rosemary Gilly said it's often hard to tell the difference between the Djin and evil spirits, as the Djin are artful at masquerades. Sometimes they are identified through a process of elimination in terms of expulsion remedies. Djin are more likely to communicate with people than some other kind of entities, and especially in a derisive way. Psychically sensitive people develop the ability to sense the distinctive Djin energy signatures. And prime example there, Mark is psychically sensitive, and he was telling us about spreading out the light, and you can tell which type they are. If they're hanging around, they can cope with the light, so they're not so bad, but if they go straight away, they could be the worst kind. They can often attach to the body's field of energy and influence mood and behaviour. Like attracts like. And I'm sure they can be at the root of mental disorders, where people suffer from depression and anxiety and have psychological problems and they have to be hospitalised because of it. I'm sure it's often because these things have attached to them and they're feeding off them and influencing the person's mood, so they're never going to get better unless they can recognise what it is and learn from it. Rosemary Gilly said, I've been studying shadow people for many years and I've come to the conclusion that this is a form taken by Djin. The shadow people often manifest as the silhouette of a tall man wearing a coat or cape and sometimes a hat. There are no facial features. They are usually bedroom visitors because we become aware of them in our sleep state, and in that transition between sleeping and waking, which causes the paralysis, where only part of your conscious mind is awake, we can be aware of them. They could be in this room now. We wouldn't know because we're not tuned into it. They live very long lifespans, hundreds of, perhaps even thousands of years. Like humans, they have the potential to ascend to an enlightened state of being. Another researcher, a gentleman called Pao Chang, obviously Chinese, says, I personally had encounters with the shadow people, a group of humanoid beings that like to hide in the shadows and often appear as shadow figures. When I was a child, they would often appear in my bedroom and harass me when I was in the process of falling asleep. It was not until my late 20s that they stopped appearing in my bedroom. I felt that one of the reasons why they stopped harassing me was because I did not fear them anymore. Again, echoing what Mark said earlier. Based on my experience, the shadow people have had very negative vibration. Sometimes their vibration was so negative that when they appeared beside my bed, their energy paralyzed me, making it hard for me to stay calm and breathe. My experience with the shadow people helped me to discover some effective methods for preventing negative entities, such as Djin and demons, from harassing me. One method is to not fear them. An even more effective method is to not be afraid to exercise your natural rights. One of your most powerful natural rights is free will. When negative entities harass you, tell them to stop or face the consequences of violating your free will. The universe has its own law system, so do not be afraid to use the law system of the universe to enforce the power of natural law. Now we're going to look at a couple of South Wales cases now. This is February 1970, Timor Colliery, Pontypridd. In the early hours, a guy called Price Jacobs was a shift mechanic at the colliery. He had a chilling sensation and saw a cloaked ghost, he termed it a ghost, peering into a coal bunker at Timor Colliery, Hopkinstown. He said it then disappeared into the darkness in the direction of St. David's churchyard nearby. Could this be a ghost in a spiritual sense, or is it this interdimensional entity associated with the abduction phenomenon? In 1982, in Clydach, during the night, Phil Prevo, who's known by a couple of us, was walking his dog in Clydach. That's not a picture of Phil, by the way. It's not even a picture of what he saw. It's just something I've taken off the internet to illustrate what I'm talking about. He was walking his dog in Clydach and was walking through a small field on the edge of some woodland when he saw a dark hooded figure, like a monk, with his hood up, standing on the other side of the field where the woods started. He was standing stock still. Phil did not attempt to attract its attention by calling out, but just continued on his walk. The dog was unaffected by the apparition. I shit myself. At least he had the dog for company. Right, there's you leave it on that for a while. A guy called Zach was in his early 20s, living in Merthyr Tydfil with his parents. One summer night he went to bed about 1 to 2 a.m. and felt nervous and sick after lying down. He sensed something was wrong. He did, however, manage to get to sleep, but woke in the early hours to see the room lit in a strange way, making it appear brown and purple. Directly over him, he saw a hovering, cloaked figure wearing a hood which was up. He could not see its face, which was in blackness. He saw it in suitable detail to notice the hood was frayed at its edges. It was humanoid in shape and was about 7 feet tall. It moved over Zach's body, pinning him down by some force, and he could feel it pushing him down and lifting him. He tried to scream out, but could not, and tried to move his arms. Suddenly, he found himself in his back garden, the colours of which were distorted like his bedroom had been, and the sky was clear. He walked around a corner into the main part of the garden. He saw the hooded figure flying away into the sky at a very steep angle, its cloak moving in the wind. Once it had gone, Zach went back into the house. He then found himself waking up in bed and felt that it was not long after he had returned to bed, it being still dark. He felt shocked and nervous. He got up and went out into the garden. The colours were now normal, but he noticed that the clouds and position of the moon were exactly as he recalled from his earlier experience, which convinced him that what had taken place could not have been a dream. He told his mother about it in the morning, and she told him that she too had experienced similar things when she was younger. Over the years, Zach has experienced many vivid dreams and encounters which could be put down to the common experience of sleep paralysis, in which entities can be sensed holding the witness down. A lady called Tina lives in Swansea. That's not her, by the way. Tina's a long history of anxiety and depression, which I mentioned earlier, but mental health. And at the same time, she has psychic sensitivity in that she often sees spirits and feels presences at home and elsewhere. She has no wish to tap into this ability and develop it up to the present time, but has often felt that she does not belong here, has difficulty in fitting in, and together with a feeling of being watched, has experienced seeing the dark hooded figure. She had often seen it in her bedroom at night and had assumed that it was her spirit guide, which she called her monk. When considering other experiences that she has had, and one definite episode of missing time associated with a light in a back garden around 2001, together with a very vivid dream in early 2016 of being on another planet with welcoming beings and a feeling that she was home. She did some research into the Star Child hypothesis, having never heard of it before that time, and indeed had never shown any interest in UFOs or related subjects up to that point. She was struck by the similarity of her own condition and experiences and those commonly experienced by other star children. She does not experience episodes of night paralysis, but continues to have the feeling of being watched. Two brothers from my stake, David and Andrew. These brothers have had UFO sightings from a young age, together with other members of the family, including their parents, and also in the company of their own children. They've also experienced many visitations of entities in their home, including some which seem to be similar to poltergeist activity. When they were children, the boys used to share a bedroom, and remember one night they saw fingers and a head coming around the door frame, which they described as a black figure. Whenever Andrew's friends stayed over, they would frequently get nosebleeds during the night, but never the brothers. In 1992, David was in bed trying to get to sleep and felt someone grabbing his wrist to try to pull him out of bed. He jumped up and a poster fell off the wall and a number of deodorant cans on a unit flew off like they'd been knocked off. In 1996, Andrew had a dream that there was a light outside his bedroom window. After telling David about it, they found 3 finger and thumb prints on the outside of the window glass. 1992, a 12-year-old friend, a girl in their house, saw a large black figure outside a bedroom door which frightened her severely at about 9 p.m. Later that night, at about 2 or 3, Andrew was washing in his bathroom sink and saw the same figure in the bedroom doorway through the mirror. He described it as a black hooded figure with no definition. He turned around quickly, but it had gone. Another time, Andrew was in bed listening to music on earphones and suddenly felt a numbness as if he'd been injected. starting in his feet and continuing up his body, and then he felt a pressure on his body followed by a presence next to his bed, which suggests that it was inducing a paralysis state in him. He felt his eyes being forced open and could feel a hand on his face. His eyes opened and he briefly saw a figure standing over him. He was afraid to go to bed for weeks, and this happened a few times, starting with a feeling that he was being watched. Other poltergeists-like activity too were happening at the time. He told his mother about it, and she told him that she too had seen a figure standing over her baby at the time it died of cot death years before, in the same house. Andrew moved bedroom, but one night he felt someone grab his ankles and physically turn him over, and then he blacked out. He later moved to Treforest and lived in 3 different houses where similar occurrences happened in each one. This implies that it was not a haunting entity linked to a particular place, but is somehow linked to Andrew himself. He said it still goes on up to the present, 2016. His partner too has experienced many things since they got together. She's woken up to sense a presence in the room, has experienced paralysis and seen a black figure looking over Andrew. They've also seen and heard things together. 2009, Andrew had a tumour removed from his neck. When he went back to have his staples taken out, the surgeon asked him who did the operation on his stomach. No one, Andrew replied. Then he had conjunctivitis, and his GP referred him to an optician who asked him if he'd ever had significant head trauma, as she noticed scarring on the back of his eyeball. He'd not had head trauma. But as a child, he had to wear big, thick NHS glasses, but when a teen, he had no need for them. He had an eye test in 2014 and was given 20/20 vision. More recently, Andrew was at his girlfriend's house in Croeseru and was dozing on the sofa while their young son was asleep upstairs. He had a ringing in his ear and saw a short, bald figure in the hall looking upstairs, with the room light glinting off the top of its head. Andrew had some feeling that it was interested in his son upstairs and mentally sent a message telling it, "Don't you fucking dare." It then disappeared. Obviously, that was not a shadow person, but it was, from the description, it seems it's a grey alien, but it's acting in a similar way to the shadow person, like Mark was saying about it, telling it to go away, and it went. David's struggling with the whole subject. He knows it's real, but at the same time finds himself resenting the topic. He's read 100 books, but still no near finding the answers. Both David and Andrew have experienced scoop marks, triangular marks, and bruises on the arm, which look remarkably like finger marks. This is another case called Emlyn from Swansea. She lives in Swansea and has had repeated experiences for many years. One in particular was a time she was sleeping on the sofa in her house and woke to become aware of a grey by her side, grabbing her ankle. She had a feeling that she was on a bed and there was a doorway ahead of her feet end, with bright white light filling it, and in the light she saw the silhouette of a tall, dark figure. Other experiences involve a screen memory of a helicopter flying close to her window, which doesn't seem to be a helicopter. Again, there's a link there between the activity of the greys and a shadow person. This is one I found about just 2 days ago. A woman called Andrea lives in St. Athan. That's not her, by the way. She's married to a squaddy called William, and he's based at St. Athans in the parachute regiment. One night she awoke to find she couldn't move, a sleep paralysis episode. She sensed a dark figure standing by her bed, near her head, and she could feel a stroking sensation on the side of her cheek, which felt like someone was wiping her with a wet wipe. There was another dark figure actually sitting on her chest, with its face close to hers. Those of you who have experienced the very unsettling feeling of sleep paralysis, have you ever tried to scream? And nothing's happening, is it? Because your motor functions aren't working. Well, this is what she tried to do. She tried to well up the will to scream, but before she could force it out, the being on her chest screamed at her in her face, really close, and the two figures rushed out of the bedroom door. Moments later, there was a flash across the sky seen through the bedroom window. Now, her husband, William, checked the radar at the base at St. Athan, and nothing was detected, and no planes were flying that night. Another squaddie, now based at St. Athan, was telling me about an experience he had when he was in Afghanistan. He was in the barracks and sleeping in the bottom of a bunk bed, but there was nobody else in the room, it was just him sleeping. He had a sheet draped over the bunk to dim the light, and there were boxes next to the bed which he used to support his laptop, amongst other things. He had a sleep paralysis episode in which he was aware of someone in the bunk with him, its face close to his, and he could hear and feel its breathing. And he said there's no way anyone could have got into the bunk, if somebody was messing around, because they'd made a noise, as the boxes would have had to be moved and the curtain would have moved, and so. And again, there's for Hilary Porter, you might have heard of Hilary Porter. She's through her life has experienced many abductions, often involving greys, and sometimes involving this hooded figure. Now, one theory that I have is that the greys, their agenda they got of abducting people, and they reckon that there's a hybridization program going on, because it does involve taking eggs and sperm and then putting them back and then taking the baby away, and there's so many cases of that. And they seem to, sometimes they come out of the wall, or they just appear in the room, and they can take the person through solid mats, through a solid wall into a waiting craft. Now, I'm convinced they're travelling, either they're from another dimension or they're coming via another dimension, bending space and time to cover the vast distances or whatever. And these portals that they're opening, I think they're on the same frequency as what the shadow people are using. So it might look like they're working together, but it just might be that when these portals are opened and they're taking people when they're asleep, the people are in this lucid sleep paralysis mode, they often see the shadow people at the same time as the greys. Again, I'm not an expert, what do I know, but it's just a theory that I have. Near the end now, by the way. I'm sure you're keen to go home to your beds. Where are we? Yeah, next one.
That's the last one.
That's the last one, over. Okay. Oh yeah, that's right. This is quite a funny one, actually, because it was in broad daylight, and it's in Swansea. This is the 28th of July 2010, 4:30 p.m. The witness said, I was walking through Swansea back to my car near the council offices. I don't know if that's the county hall or the guild hall, I don't know. At about 4:30, it was a dark Tuesday afternoon, and it was raining slightly. That's a surprise, it was raining. I looked up and saw what I believe was a flying man in black. This is not a joke. I don't know if it was a man-shaped balloon or a black bin bag caught in the wind or a flying man in black, but I was very scared. The figure glided across the road and suddenly changed direction. The object was moving very slowly and was almost gliding. I would say that it was 500 feet above the ground. It flew over the top of some trees and then disappeared from view. Please, this is not a wind-up. So that's a rare occurrence of something. I'm not saying that was a shadow person. It could have just been a bin bag, if you don't know. But it was shaped like a man, and it was black. So in my box, it's a shadow person. Thank you very much. That's it.
Loving thoughts out there, sort of thing. And if sometimes they'll bounce back, that whoever's around you sometimes,
Well,
they're
it
not.
goes back to what he was saying earlier on, that there are some of those ones who will stay around even when you do that. So if
Yeah.
they deserve to be there, but you don't want them to
And
be
that's
there,
why I
there is
think-
the free will and the universal laws. They have
Yeah,
to
but
go
when you say
because-
that, the one thing that bothers me about the universal law thing is, yeah, but if they're really low
I'm just saying
entities,
that in
you know what I
general,
mean? Is if they're really low entities, they're not going to worry about the universal law, are they?
Oh yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
Not all of paralysis is. Not all of paralysis is shadow people. A lot of the paralysis is us coming out of the body when we sleep. And when we come back in, sometimes we don't align properly. So we experience a paralysis while our spirit bodies are trying to realign with our physical bodies. This has happened to me on a number of occasions. Sometimes I've got out. I do get out of the body quite often, which is how I come across Todd as well, through Lawrence as well.
Saves a best friend.
It does. Sometimes I've gotten out and my eyes are not working, I can't see. And I'm trying to find my way back to my body. But when I get back in, then I can't move. So that this goes on. You can be in that situation for 20 minutes, a half hour, sometimes less. So not all of it is bad. Not all of it are shadow people. Some of it is quite scary, but not something that's going to pass in the end. And we're going to end up back in our bodies anyway. So.
Well, I got pinned down in 97, and I was laying on my side, and I sort of fell asleep with my eyes open, and this thing come to the wall, and it come to such speed, and when it saw that I could see it, it pinned my arms to my chest, and it was literally like that. And I tried to scream to help, and I couldn't scream, and I just gave up. I just went to sleep. I just thought, it's beating me, and I went to sleep. And when I woke up, it had gone. But it's always stayed. But when I spoke to Austin Charles about it, he said it wasn't negative. He said when your chakras were out of balance or something like that, that it was actually there to help you. But it didn't seem like that at the time. So it's what we interpret as well, isn't it?
Exactly. Lack of understanding creates fear, and then it could offer a doorway for them to come in and have a cheap shot at us. But no, often or not, it's not.
Yeah. Just
not
like
like
that.
You talk about sleep paralysis, there's truth in it, because, a lot of people move around in their sleep, don't they?
Yeah.
If you're moving around in your sleep, how is that possible if you go into sleep paralysis? People always move around and they're comfortable and...
I think a sleep paralysis happens in between, I believe it's alpha state, it's a theta state, one or the other. When we're just in between waking and consciousness, or coming down from consciousness into sleep. So I think it's that it's kind of sweet spot where it can happen, and a lot of people are aware, because we're in that sweet spot, we're aware of it happening. So, but I think when you're sleeping, you've come down too far. I believe it's into delta state then, or delta wave, where we're out of touch from all that anyway then. So maybe we're just travelling or in such a deep sleep that we haven't gone anywhere. So
I think it's just under REM circumstances that we're unable to move that part of the sleep. I mean, it's there for a safety, obviously, isn't it? So that you can't hurt yourself.
You'll be walking out your dream, won't you?
Exactly, you'll be carrying out your dream, you'll be walking around, yeah. I mean, that does happen, obviously people do sleepwalk, but I don't think it's during REM when you're actually physically incapacitated, other than perhaps your bodily functions, your life functions. Anybody else? No? Right, I think, yes.
On radio tonight, I was listening to the radio, and they said that Radio 4 at 9 o'clock, they were going to discuss this subject
That's right.
for sleep paralysis and so on. So I thought we might catch it on the iPlayer later.
Yeah. John mentioned that on the way earlier.
You didn't hear Avril then. John was telling me about this earlier, that this evening on Radio 4 there was a programme about sleep paralysis. And it'll be available on iPlayer, so you could listen to it again. So.
It's probably an
Oh yeah.
obvious question, but I guess it should be asked. Does it follow family bloodlines? Because I've got a lot of my own family members and friends who talk about this stuff, and their relatives, older relatives, talk about the same thing.
Yeah, it comes up again with the alien abduction scenario that often follows bloodlines of families, doesn't it?
I'm just wondering, is it the abduction? Is it the black men coming together?
I think it's probably about the both. Like I said, I got the theory that whatever portal that the Greys are using to come in and out of our dimension, that
I'm sorry to keep asking it, but it's just this ringing of the ears thing, you know. I know tinnitus is a major condition, but I've known from people who've had it, the left ear is always the one. But you talk about the portal opening, if you get it in the right ear and it's really strong, like a tuning fork in your ears, then that's probably the
you said something about that, didn't you?
physically. But I'm just wondering if there's anyone, have any of you ever looked into that?
I think maybe, and this is just it's just my theory from what I've looked into. Obviously there are medical conditions like tinnitus and stuff like that, but I think a lot of it is we get those frequencies in our ears spontaneously, yeah. And I believe that's the portals opening up. I believe that's energy centers being activated, and our crystals in our brain start vibrating, and then we can hear it.
It's that case, Andrew's case, I read out. Yeah, he said that quite often before it happens, he gets this ringing in his ears. Maybe what you said is the crystals.
It's going to, I got the links on my iPad. I'm going to take them. It's gone mainstream now. But, have a look. It's been in the alternative arena for a long time, but obviously science don't really want to give us everything, but when they're forced to, they do something about it. But what they've said about the crystals in our brain, they've named the crystals, and they've said it will give us brain tumours and stuff like that. So it's just another thing to put us off our true nature and what we are and how we connect on this plane, on this grid. So, yeah.
Right, thank you all for coming, and you all missed your Halloween parties, haven't you? So, yeah, well, I've enjoyed tonight. I hope you have as well.
Sorry, can I just ask
One more question.
Like a backline going on and on. My brain won't shut off.
Who is this? Who is this?
wall?
I don't know, he just walked in.
Just walked in?
He's
What
walking.
is this war we're fighting then? What is this war going on?
That's one for you.
Marcus, this wall.
What is it?
Which war?
The war between us and them and everything else that they cause.
I think a lot of it happens.
That shaman thing you put up there, you know, and the Vader came and put
Yeah, a lot of the war's going on in the astral, and it spills over from what I've looked at into our realm sometimes. So there'll be specific areas, physical areas, where I can give you an example. For myself, me and my children watched a big black ball going across Swansea Bay on fire. That ended up in the Porthcawl area. The next day, apparently the air cadets crashed and died. But it gave them an excuse to cordon off all that area, which I feel, because we saw it, they just wanted to look what was in the sea. And I think stuff comes in and out all the time. If you look at the James Casbolt stuff, or Michael Prince on YouTube, he was actually part of the team that investigated these things happening, and he said if you see a road blockage in your area or anywhere else, go and have a look, because he said more often than not it's a downed UFO, because that's what's going on, and it's filtering, not just sheer on a physical, it's actually a full-on war going out on the astral planes as well, and filtering through to us. And this is very interesting, because Todd Achemesis mentions about when he came out of body once, that he was met by some military personnel who took him to a base on the astral planes and asked him if he wanted a job, which is very interesting. He turned it down, but they told him they have technology that's able to get us out of our bodies and keep us out there longer. They've also got structures out there. So this war is, you know, it's massive and it's just ongoing. So it's very interesting.
Just to know how, even on the astral plane, things are physical from their perspective.
Yeah.
Even though they're ghostly from our perspective, it's physical when you're there.
It's Hollywood that has given us this perception of spirit and entity, and I think it's a lot more scientific than that. I'm again myself. I'm out of body a lot, and I can tell you when I'm out of body, it's no different to here. Absolutely no different. And conversing with somebody when you're fully conscious out there, is no different to talking to you guys. So it's these realms, you know, you've got dimensions, you've got sub-realities, you've got lower realms, it's just butt up against us. It's massive. So it's so interesting, you know, when you look into it.
Well, when I read Michael Newton's book, he was talking about TV screens and the spirit world, I just burst out laughing. But after watching Todd Akidisis, and I recommend everybody watching, he's fantastic on YouTube, when he explained things, it just all clicked, it made sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let me again thank everybody for coming out and listening to us wittering on. There we are. Next month we're back to...